Hi everyone, today's topic is reading and writing from SAT. The domain is information ideas, the skills, central ideas, and the details. The difficulty level is medium. The first question. A common assumption among art historians is that the invention of photography in the mid-19th century displaced the painted portrait in the public consciousness. The diminishing popularity of the portrait miniature, which coincided with the rise of photography, seems to support this claim. However, photography's impact on portrait miniature may be overstated. Although records from art exhibitions in the Netherlands from 1820 to 1892 show a decrease in the number of both full-size and miniature portraits submitted, this trend was established before the invention of photography. Okay, now let's look at the question. Based on the text, what can be concluded about the diminishing popularity of the portrait miniature in the 19th century? So, what caused the diminish in the popularity of portrait? Let's see. Option A. Factors other than the rise of photography may be more directly responsible for the portrait miniature's decline. The answer is probably this one, but let's eliminate other options too. Also, portrait miniature became less common than photographs, as they were widely regarded as having more artistic merit. The text doesn't talk about artistic merit at all. The popularity of portrait miniature likely persisted for longer than art historians have assumed. Not really. The text mostly tells that the diminish started even before photography, so it's complete opposite. The answer is opposite. As demand for portrait miniatures decreased, portrait artists likely shifted their creative focus to photography. Again, this one is also wrong because in the text, the text tells us that portraits started diminishing well before the photography. So the answer is A. Something other than photography influenced portrait miniatures' decline. Now B. The second question. Believing that living in an impractical space can heighten awareness and even improve health, conceptual artists Madeline Jeans and Shusaku Arakawa designed an apartment building in Japan to be more fanciful than functional. A kitchen counter in the chest high on one side and knee high on the other side. A ceiling has a door to nowhere. The effect is disorienting, but invigorating. After 4 years, their filmmaker Nobu Yamaoka reported significant health benefits. Let's see what the options say. Also, inhabiting a home surrounded by fanciful features such as those designed by Jeans and Arakawa can be rejuvenating. It is unsustainable. The text tells us that living in such disorienting place helps the health of people, so we need to find something that talks about health, the options that talks about health benefits. Designing disorienting spaces like those in the Jeans and Arakawa building is the most effective way to create a physically stimulating environment. The answer is probably this one. As a filmmaker, Yamaoka has long supported the designs of conceptual artists such as Jeans and Arakawa. It doesn't talk about it at all. Also, in practical, the design of the apartment building by Jeans and Arakawa may improve the well-being of the building's residents. Okay, the answer is D. Design disorienting space like those Jeans and Arakawa building is the most effective way. The text doesn't tell that it's the most effective way to create a stimulating environment. It tells that it helps improve the well-being, the health of people, but it's not the most effective way. So the answer here is D. Now, the question asks, how do historians view Pachuca style? During the World War II era, some Mexican-American women adopted a striking new look called Pachuca style. They wore altered men's jacket or zoot suits, wide-legged, long-coated suits, and dramatic makeup, and they combed their hair into high, rounded shapes. Some people criticized Pachuca style, saying it was dangerous and women should dress traditionally, but historians see things differently. They see Pachuca style as a form of rebellion against the very rigid social expectations for women. They say that it showed a desire for self-expression and freedom on part of the woman who adopted this style. Let's look at the options. They think that Pachuca style was such a popular trend that it continues to influence fashion in the United States. It doesn't really talk about current fashion. They think that Pachuca style was a way for some Mexican American women to express themselves and resist strict social expectations. It's probably the answer. Let's eliminate C and D. They think that Pachuca style was celebrated because it enabled some Mexican American women to show their support for the United States. It doesn't talk about support. They think that Pachuca style was similar to other fashion trends. It doesn't really talk about the similarity of Pachuca style to other fashion trends, so the answer is B. According to the text, why ecologists worried about Pando? Uti is home to Pando, a colony of about 47,000 quaking aspen trees that all share a single root system. Pando is one of the largest single organisms by mass on Earth, but ecologists are worried that its growth is declining, in part because of grazing by animals. The ecologists say that strong fences could prevent deer from eating young trees and help Pando start thriving again. It isn't growing at the same rate as it's used to. The answer is probably A. It isn't producing young trees anymore. It produces, but the speed is declining, so the answer B is wrong. It can't grow into new areas because it's blocked by fences. It isn't blocked by fences. On the contrary, ecologists say that fences could help the tree to grow. Its root system can support many more new trees. The text even doesn't mention that, so the answer is A. Biologists have predicted that birds' feather structures vary with habitat temperature, but this hadn't been tested in mountain environments. Ornithologist Sahar Parv studied feathers from 249 songbird species inhabiting different elevations, and thus experiencing different temperatures in the Himalayan mountains. He found that feathers of high elevation species not only have a greater proportion of forming down a section to flat and smooth sections than do feathers of low elevation species, but high elevation species feathers also tend to be longer, providing a thicker layer of insulation. Okay, let's look at the answers. Parv's investigation shows that species of Himalayan songbird have evolved feathers that better regulate body temperature than do feathers of other species, contradicting previous predictions. I don't really think that it's an answer because his findings support the prediction. So the answer is wrong. And also it doesn't compare to other species. Instead, they compare birds that are located in different temperatures and elevations. Parv found an association between habitat temperature and feather structure among Himalayan birds, lending new to support a general prediction. The answer is probably B, but let's look at other choices too. Parv discovered that songbirds have adapted to their environment by growing feathers without flat and smooth sections, complicating earlier hypothesis. Not really. The answer isn't C. The result of Parv's study suggests that ability of birds to withstand cold temperatures is determined more strongly by feather lengths. Not really. I don't really think that this one is the answer. The answer is indeed B. What does the text indicate about the geological formation at Mistaken Point? Paleontologists searching for signs of ancient life have found many fossilized specimens of prehistoric human ancestors, including several from the Pleistocene era discovered in geological formation in the Minatagawa Quarry in Japan. However, to study the emergence of the earliest multicellular organisms to appear on Earth, researchers must turn elsewhere, such as geology at Mistaken Point in Canada. So, UNESCO World Heritage Site, the 166-hectare reserve contains more than 10,000 fossils that together document a critical moment in the evolution of history. Okay, the text tells us that in order to find the earliest multicellular organisms, we need to look at mistaken points. So their fossils are way more ancient. It holds a greater number of fossils, but from a smaller variety. It doesn't talk about number. It's fossils at mistaken point are ancient. It has provided evidence that the earliest human species may have emerged before the Pleistocene era. It's not a point, actually. It's widely considered to be paleontologists to be the most valuable source of information about prehistoric life forms. It contains specimens from an older time period. The answer is this one, periods, and those found the formation in the Minatagawa Quarry. The answer is D because it tells that fossils in mistaken point are older. The text makes huge point about the difference between the proportions of Quito residents and Lima residents using parks. It's in between proportion of Quito residents and Lima residents using parks. Let's highlight this part. Okay, a study by Mika R. Moran, Daniel Rodriguez, and colleagues residents of Quito, Ecuador, and Lima, Peru, were surveyed about parks in their cities. Of the 618 respondents from Quito, 82.9% indicate that they use the city's park, and of the 663 respondents from Lima, 72.7% indicated using city parks. Given that the percentage of Quito respondents who reported living within 10-minute walk of a park was much lower than that reported by Lima respondents, greater proximity alone can't explain the difference in park use. So, the answers. It was much larger than the researchers conducting the study expected. No. The answer should be related to this highlighted part, actually. It's caused by something other than park's proximity to city residents. The answer is probably B. It could be due to inaccuracies in the results of survey. Not really. The text doesn't mention any kind of inaccuracies. It was calculated using sources that predate the survey. No. The text doesn't mention that. The answer is B. Which states the main idea of the text. During a pedestrian trip last summer through one or two of the river counties of New York, I found myself, as the day declined, somewhat embarrassed about the road I was pursuing. The land undulated very remarkably, and my path for the last hour had wandered about so confusedly in its efforts to keep in the valleys that I no longer knew in what direction lay the sweet village of P. So he was lost, where I had determined to stop for the night. The narrator remembers the trip he took and admits getting lost. The answer is probably A. The narrator recalls from fond memories. It's not really fond memories. He was lost. The narrator describes what he saw during a long trip to a frequently visited location. No, as the narrator explains the difficulties he encountered on a trip and how he overcame them. He doesn't talk about the fact that he overcame them. He just admitted that he was lost. So the answer is A. Which question does the text most directly attempt to answer? A contraction of you-all, the pronoun you-all, has long been used as a plural version of you in the South and in Black communities around the U.S. In recent decades, most of the English-speaking communities in the U.S. have begun to use you-all. What explains its rising popularity? Many varieties of English have no pronoun that specifically addresses more than one person and instead must use you to address both one person and more than one. But you always refers to two or more people. As a result, it conveys speaker's meaning more precisely than you can. So the main point here is to explain the reason why you has been so popular in US. How many other plural versions of the pronoun you are there in English besides you? It talks about only you, not besides. Why has the pronoun you become more widely used in the US? The answer is probably B. When was the first recorded use of pronoun you in the English language? It doesn't really talk about time. Not the answer. Is you commonly used in English-speaking regions of the world besides the US? It doesn't talk about the territories besides the US, so the answer is B. In 1934, physicist Eugene Wigner posited that the existence of a crystal consisting entirely of electrons in a honeycomb-like structure, the so-called Wigner crystal, remained largely conjecture. However, until Feng Wang and colleagues announced in 2021 that they had captured an image of one. The researchers trapped electrons between two semiconductors and then cooled the apparatus, causing the electrons to settle into a crystalline structure by inserting an ultra-thin sheet of graphene above the crystal. The researchers obtained an impression, the first visual confirmation of the Wigner crystal. Researchers have obtained the most definitive evidence to date of the existence of the Wigner crystal. It may be the answer. Researchers have identified an innovative new method for working with unusual crystalline structures. No, it talks about mostly Wigner crystal. Graphene is the most important component. It doesn't talk, graphene isn't the main idea here. It's difficult to acquire an image of a Wigner crystal because of the crystal's honeycomb structure. Yeah, it's difficult, but it's not the main idea. So the answer is B. Based on the text, which choice piece describes the two previously unknown penguin species? Paleontologist Alan Tennyson and colleagues studied fossil bones found in New Zealand that are more than 55 million years old. The researchers determined that the fossil bones belonged to two previously unknown species of prehistoric penguins. Moreover, they estimated that one of the two penguin species was more than 3 times the size of the emperor penguin, which is the largest penguin species that exists today. So, those penguins currently do not exist. Let's see at the options. They are frequently studied by paleontologists. No, it's the main idea here isn't this one. They are no longer living species. Probably this one is the answer. They were smaller than penguin species. On the contrary, they are 3 times bigger than emperor penguins. They spent little of their lives in water. It doesn't talk how much time they spent in water, so the answer is B. According to the text, what is the difference between how historians view Simon Miesel and how they view Mieszko II Lambert? Historians point to the rule of the Piast dynasty as crucial to the formation of the Polish state. However, some differentiate between members of the dynasty, like Mieszko II Lambert, who ruled as a king from 1025 to 1033 CE and less 31 CE, and less well-documented figures like Simon Moseley, who is said to have ruled in the 10th century, but whose historical actuality is disputed. So we know that Mieszko ruled as a king, but we are not sure about the other one. So the answer should contain this information. Historians agree that Mieszko II Lambert existed, but disagree about whether Simon Moseley existed. The answer is probably A, but let's look at the other choices. Historians believe that the Gesta Principum Paulinorum provides more evidence for Simon Moseley. It doesn't really answer the question than it does for Mieszko II Lambert's existence. Historians agree that Simon Moseley wrote poem much later. No, they are not sure even whether he ruled or not. Historians find the orally transmitted stories affirming the existence of Mieszko to be more convincing. No, the answer is A. Philadelphia's Black Pearl Chamber Orchestra, founded by Jerry Lynn Johnson, performs classical music from well-known compositions by Beethoven to contemporary works by Jesse Montgomery. For the orchestra's Eye Contact program, Johnson invites community members to learn some basic elements of conducting and then experiences conducting Black Pearl Orchestra themselves. The Black Pearl Orchestra performs music from all over the world, but mostly performs music composed by Philadelphians. No. Main idea isn't this. The main idea here is the fact that community members also learn basic skills and they experience conducting the Black Pearl Orchestra themselves. Johnson founded the Black Pearl Orchestra to perform classical music by contemporary artists Jesse Montenegro. Now, the Black Pearl Orchestra gives community members the chance to both listen and participate in classical music. The answer is probably C. Johnson as community members conduct an orchestra to demonstrate how difficult. He doesn't want to demonstrate how difficult the task is. So the answer is C. In West Africa, Jalis have traditionally been keepers of information about family histories and records of important events. They have served as teachers and advisors too. New technologies may have changed some aspects of the role today, but Jalis continue to be valued for knowing and protecting their people's stories. Let's look at the answers. Even though there have been some changes in their role, Jalis continue to preserve their community's histories. I think the answer is A, but let's look at other options. Although Jalis have many roles, many of them like teaching best. It doesn't really tell that teaching is the best or which of their jobs is the best. Jalis have been entertaining pupils. They haven't been entertaining. Technology can now do some of the things Jalis used to be responsible for. It's true, but it's not the main idea. The main idea here is the fact that new technologies have changed some aspects, but Jalis still are not valued in Africa, in West Africa. So the answer is A. The text is set in a Russian city referred to as the city of S. If newcomers to the little provincial city of S complained that life there was monotonous and dull, its inhabitants would answer that, on the contrary, S was a very amusing place indeed, that it had a library and a club, that balls were given there, and finally that very pleasant families lived there with whom one might become acquainted, and they always pointed to the Turkins as most accomplished and most enlightened family of all. So, what does the text suggest about the Turkins? They are the most accomplished people, so they have a unique status in this city of S. The answer is probably B. They are relative newcomers. They are not newcomers, they are accomplished and the most enlightened family there. They have long disliked living in the city of, they do not dislike it. They are amused by other residents. They aren't amused by other residents, so the answer is B. The Dye-Wool Navajo weaver Lily Taylor uses plants and vegetables from Arizona, where she lives. For example, she achieves the deep reds and browns featured in her 2003 rug in the Path of the Four Seasons by using Arizona dog roots, drying and grinding them before mixing the powder with water to create a dye bath. So she used natural things to dye. To intensify the appearance of certain colors, Taylor also sometimes mixes in clay obtained from nearby soil. The main idea here is reds and browns aren't commonly featured. They are featured in Taylor's rugs, and the main idea here is the fact that she uses natural things to dye. Taylor draws on local resources in the approach she uses to dye wool. Taylor finds it difficult to locate Arizona dog root in the desert. It doesn't really talk about it at all. In the Path of Four Seasons is widely acclaimed for its many colors. The main idea here isn't in the Path of Four Seasons, so the answer is B. The fact that she uses local resources, natural resources in the approach. Let's see. According to text, What do some historians suggest about Maya civilization? The ancient writing system used in the Maya kingdoms of southern Mexico and Central America had a symbol for the number 0. The earliest known example of the symbol dates to more than 2,000 years ago. At that time, almost none of the writing systems elsewhere in the world possessed a 0 symbol, and the use of 0 in Mexico and Central America may be even more ancient. Some historians suggest that Maya mathematicians inherited it from Olmec civilization, which flourished in the region. Let's look at the answers. Maya civilization acquired the use of 0 from the Olmec civilization. The answer is probably this one. The same thing is mentioned here. Maya civilization respected its historians. It doesn't really talk about the fact that Maya civilization respected their historians and their mathematicians. It doesn't talk about respect. Maya civilization was highly secretive. It doesn't tell that Maya civilization was secretive. The main idea here is the fact that they inherited 0. Maya civilization tried to introduce its writing system to other civilizations. It doesn't talk about this at all. So the answer here is A. At over 1,000 pages across 2 volumes, the 50-year mission compiled by Edward Gross and Mark A. Altman is presented as a complete, uncensored, unauthorized oral history, as told by the people behind the media franchise Star Trek. The work aspires to be comprehensive by, for example, including accounts from cast and crew members of every Star Trek television and film to date. But while the 50-year mission is clearly a unique and valuable resource, it has a shortcoming common among oral histories. It lacks a clear historical point of view that could otherwise unite the various accounts into a cohesive whole. Here the main idea is the fact that the 50-year mission is unique and valuable, but it still has some shortcomings. The compilers of the 50-year mission had lofty goals. It doesn't talk about the goals of compilers, so this one is wrong. There is no need to read all of it. The 50-year mission includes more accounts from people involved with Star Trek television shows than it does from people involved with Star Trek films. It doesn't even talk about Star Trek films or television, so there is no need to compare. The answer isn't B. The large amount of material compiled into the 50-year mission is surprising, given that many of the people involved in the Star Trek franchise didn't participate in the oral history. It doesn't say that there is a large amount of material compiled there, or the fact that it's surprising because the franchise didn't participate in the oral history project. The answer isn't C either. The answer is probably D. The 50-year mission represents a worthwhile attempt to thoroughly recount the history of the Star Trek franchise, but its approach has an important limitation. There are synonyms here. Limitation is shortcoming, and worthwhile is unique and valuable. These are the synonyms here. So by finding synonyms, it's also possible to find the answer. The answer here is D. In present-day Mexico, archaeologist Robert Rosenzweig, remote sensing specialist Ricardo Lopez Torrijos, and the colleagues have located 41 smaller settlements surrounding the ancient Mesoamerican city of Izapa. The researchers have concluded that these settlements were culturally linked to Izapa because each of the settlements is the same age and configured in the same manner as Izapa, with a pyramid to the north and a plaza to the south. The shared structural orientation suggests that residents and settlements likely perform some of the same cultural ceremonies as residents in Izapa did. The main idea here is the researchers have determined that the arrangement of the structures was based on those of other nearby settlements. No, it doesn't say that it's based on it. Cultural ceremonies in Izapa seems to have played a more important role for its residents than those in smaller surrounding settlements did. No, it doesn't say that it's more important. Although archaeologists have learned much about Izapa, over years of research, they have only recently found the smaller settlements. It doesn't talk about the period of time that archaeologists spent learning Izapa. Researchers have informed that Izapa was related to smaller settlements that surrounded it based in part on the similarity of their construction. Yeah, the answer is probably D. The answer here is D because the structures are quite similar, so they may have been linked, which the ending of the text tells us. The painter Maria Izquierdo played an important role in the development of 20th century Mexican art, but her work has never been well known in the United States, except among art historians. One reason for Izquierdo's relative obscurity is the enormous popularity of some of her peers, in particular the painter Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. How some so captivated the interest of U.S. audiences that Izquierdo and other Mexican artists from the period often get overlooked, despite the high quality of their work. Let's look at the choices. Izquierdo's work is not as well known in the United States as it should be because Kahlo and Rivera drew so much of public's attention. The answer is probably this one. During the Izquierdo's lifetime, her paintings were displayed in galleries in the United States much more frequently. It doesn't say that at all. Izquierdo painted some of the same subjects that Kahlo and Rivera painted, but used different techniques. Since they used, the answer C isn't the main idea here either. Few of Izquierdo's work are in galleries today because she produced only a small number of paintings. It doesn't say that the main idea here is the fact that she was quite a good painter, but people paid more attention at Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, so she didn't get that much attention from the public. And it's only stated in A. Since its completion in 2014, Bosco Verticale, a pair of residential towers in Milan, Italy, covered by vegetation, has become a striking symbol of environmental sustainability in architecture. Stefano Boeri intended his design, which features balconies that are home to hundreds of trees, to serve as a model for promoting urban biodiversity. However, the concept has faced skepticism. Critics note that although the trees used in Bosco Verticale were specifically cultivated for the project, it's too early to tell if they can thrive in this unusual setting. According to the text, why are some critics so skeptical of the concept behind Bosco Verticale? Let's look at the choices. The reason of their skepticism, according to the text, is the fact that they're not sure whether the plants will thrive in this unusual setting, so we need to find the synonym of this expression. Some essential aspects of Bosco Verticale design are difficult to adapt to location other than Milan. No, the text doesn't even say that. The plant life of Bosco Verticale ended up being less varied than Boeri had envisioned it would be. Again, it doesn't talk about how varied the plants are. The construction of Bosco Verticale was no less environmentally damaging than the construction of more conventional buildings. It doesn't even mention other conventional buildings. It's unclear whether Bosco Verticale can support the plant life included in its design. Its answer. It's unclear, so it's early to tell. Unclear, these are the synonyms, and support, thrive. So the answer is D. Cherokee artist Jeffrey Gibson turns to punching bags used by boxers into art by decorating them with beadwork and elements of native dressmaking. These elements include leather fringe and jingles and the metal cones that cover the dresses worn in the jingle dance, a woman's dance of Ojibwe people. Thus, Gibson combines an object commonly associated with masculinity with art forms traditionally practiced by women in most native communities. In this way, he rejects the division of male and female gender roles. Features best describes Gibson's approach to art as presented in the text. He draws from traditional native art forms to create his original works. The answer is probably A. He has been influenced by native and non-native artists equally. It doesn't even talk about the influence that artists had on him. He finds inspiration from boxing. Boxing in designing the dresses he makes. It doesn't even mention that. He rejects expectation about color and pattern when incorporating beadwork. The text doesn't mention neither color nor pattern. So the answer is A. The narrator was once involved with the Time Regulation Institute, a fictional bureaucracy that regulates the time of Turkey's clocks. I may be the most humble and absurd man in the world, and, as my wife says, the most lonely creature you may ever meet. That is before the founding of our institute. But I did come to know a truly great man who possessed a natural genius for invention. I spent years at his side. I watched the way he worked. I witnessed how an idea would suddenly catch fire in his mind and take shape like a tree. Sprouting shoots and branches before coming into being. Which choice best states the main idea of the text? A person was fortunate enough to have found love despite his obvious shortcomings, and his love isn't the main point here. An exceptionally talented person professes humility to avoid intimidating others? No. A person appreciates the extensive time he passed in the company of someone he deeply admired. The answer is probably C. A truly brilliant person lets ideas mature in his mind before expressing them aloud. It doesn't say that the person that he worked with didn't say his ideas aloud. And also, the main idea isn't the man here, but the fact that the answer here is C. Let's move on. A subject of much speculation, distinctive sets of parallel ridges. A subject of much speculation, distinctive sets of parallel ridges marks the isocrust of Europa, Jupiter's smallest moon. Researchers now claim that the ridges formation mechanism mirrors that of a strikingly similar pair of Greenland's ice sheets. Their surface water seeped through fissures in the sheet and formed a water pocket that subsequently disrupted the overlying ice, forcing fragments of it upward and outward into peaks. As the pocket froze and expanded, although Europa lacks liquid surface water, the same process could be driven by Moon's subsurface ocean. The main idea here is, researchers think that the ridges on Europa and the ridges in Greenland may have been formed by the same process, even though Europa, unlike Greenland, doesn't have liquid water on its surface. The answer here is probably A. The primary difference between the ridges on Europa and the ridges in Greenland is that unlike the Europa ridges, the Greenland ridges are parallel. No. The pair of ridges found on Greenland's ice sheet appear to have formed long before the recently discovered sets of ridges on Europa formed. The researchers don't understand why Europa is marked by so many sets of ridges when the moon doesn't have any liquid water on its surface that could have collected and expanded under the icy crust. No. Here's the main idea is A. NASA's Aspera mission, led by Carlos Vargas, will investigate the exogalactic medium, the huge swaths of low-density gas that will fill and surround galaxies. Specifically, the team will focus on portions of the gas that exist in a warm hot phase. These portions haven't been previously observable, but are thought to fuel new star formation and hold most of the mass that makes up a galaxy. Using the telescope, Capable of revealing these parts of the CGM, the Aspire mission should help answer long-standing questions about how galaxies emerge, change, and even interact. Rejoice states the main idea of the text. As a leader of the NASA's Aspire mission, Vargas will be the first person to investigate the makeup of the CGM. The main idea here is the fact that there is warm-hot phase, and researchers haven't seen that before, so they will observe it for the first time. So the answer is A isn't the main idea. It doesn't even mention the word warm-hot. Also, galaxies that are surrounded by the CGM have been studied. Researchers have been unable to directly observe low-density gas in the CGM, the warm-hot phase. The answer is probably B, but let's look to other options. Researchers don't yet have a complete understanding of the process of galaxy evolution, but have raised the possibility that galaxies interact with each other at times. This option also doesn't mention word warm-hot. If the main idea, the option should have this word or its synonym. So A and C, due to this reason, A and C are wrong. The Aspire mission is expected to produce the first direct observation of CGM gas in the warm-hot phase, which likely has an important role in the evolution of galaxies. The answer here is probably B, because the Aspire mission is expected to produce the first direct observation of CGM gas in the warm-hot phase, which likely has an important role that it has. Okay, the answer here is probably D, because right now they're unable to study warm-hot phase. Due to this reason, our choice is wrong, and here it also says that it is important in order to understand the evolution of galaxies, just like here. How it tells questions about how galaxies emerge, change, and even interact. So the answer is D. Many intellectual histories of a Black Power movement in the 1960s and 1970s rely heavily on essays and explicitly ideological works as the primary sources, a tendency that can overrepresent the perspectives of a small number of thinkers, most of whom were male. Historian Ashley D. Farmer has shown that expanding the area of primary sources to encompass more types of print material leads to a much better understanding of the movement and the crucial and diverse roles that Black women played in shaping it. Farmer's method and research have enriched the historical understanding of Black Power movement and Black women's contributions to it. The answer is probably A, but let's look to other options. Before Farmer's research, historians had largely ignored the intellectual dimensions of the Black Power movement. It doesn't say that it was ignored. I mean, she had quite a contribution, but before her, it wasn't ignored. There were essays and other papers. Other historians of the Black Power movement have criticized Farmers. No one criticized her. The figures in the Black Power movement, whom historians tend to cite, would have agreed with Farmer's conclusion about women's roles in the movement. Doesn't say about the point of view of Black Power movement, so the answer isn't this one either. The answer here is A. Using a stratospheric observatory for infrared astronomy, a team of astronomers mapped out the magnetic field of G47, one of the Milky Way's galactic bones, dense clouds of gas and dust that run through the middle arm of a spiral galaxy. Surprisingly, the map revealed a magnetic field with no clear pattern or direction. The researchers had expected the magnetic field to be similar to the more uniform fields seen in galactic bones in other arms of the Milky Way. So the text states that map revealed the fact that magnetic field isn't clear, and also it's not uniform and isn't like other arms of Milky Way. According to the text, what was surprising about the researchers' mapping What was surprising about the researchers' mapping of the magnetic field of galactic bonds G47? It showed a weaker magnetic field. No, it showed no clear pattern. It implied that previous mappings of the magnetic field were inaccurate. No. It produced magnetic field measurements similar to those. No, it wasn't similar. Those were uniform, but this one didn't have a clear pattern. So the answer is D. It revealed a magnetic field that wasn't uniform. In many of his sculptures, artist Richard Hunt uses broad forms rather than extreme accuracy to hint at specific people or ideas. In his first major work, Arachne, Hunt constructed the mythical character Arachne, a weaver who was changed into a spider by welding bits of steel together into something that, although vaguely human, is strange and machine-like. And his large bronze sculpture, The Light of Truth, commemorates activists and journalist Ida Wells using mainly flowing curved pieces of metal that create stylized flame. Which choice best the text's main idea about Hunt? He often depicts the subjects of his sculptures using an unrealistic style. He uses different kinds of materials depending on what kind of sculpture he plans to create. It doesn't say that. It tells that he uses unrealistic mystical characters. So the answer is A, but let's look at other choices. He tends to base his art on important historical figures. No. He has altered his approach to sculpture over time. No. The answer is A. His works were already abstract, so it couldn't become increasingly abstract. Why does Bill regularly ask about seafaring men? Let's see. Every day when Bill came back from his stroll, he would ask if any seafaring men had gone by along the road. At first we thought it was the want of company of his own kind that made him ask the question, but at last we began to see he was desirous to avoid them. So he wanted to avoid them. He's hoping to find an old friend and a fellow sailor. No, on the contrary, he is trying to avoid them. He's trying to secure a job. No. He isn't sure that other guests at the inn will be welcoming of sailors. No. The answer is D. He doesn't want to encounter another sailor unexpectedly. The narrator is part of a group traveling in a hot air balloon at night. The Earth no longer seems to exist. It's buried in milky vapors that resemble a sea. We are now alone in space with the moon, which looks like another balloon traveling opposite us. And our balloon, which shines in the air, appears like another larger moon, a world wandering in the sky amidst the stars through infinity. We no longer speak, sing, nor live. We float along through space in delicious inertia. The air which is bearing us up has made of us all beings which resemble itself, silent, joyous, irresponsible beings, peculiarly alert, although motionless. The main idea here is the fact that they are absorbed by the change. They see that they are leaving the earth. So we need to find this idea here. The narrator feels a growing sense of isolation, even though his companions are nearby during the balloon ride. It doesn't say that he feels isolated. He feels that he isn't on Earth anymore, but it is not so negative. His feelings aren't so negative. The narrator and his companions are completely absorbed in the change in perspective they gain while riding in the balloon. The answer is probably this one, but let's look at other choices. The narrator and his companions are troubled by the disorienting effects of the altitude while riding in the balloon. The answer isn't this. They do not have any disorienting effects. The narrator is pleasantly surprised. He isn't surprised at all. So the answer here is B. The recovery of a 1,000-year-old Chinese shipwreck in the Java Sea near present present-day Indonesia has yielded a treasure trove of artifacts, including thousands of small ceramic bowls. Using a portable X-ray fluorescence analyzer tool, Lisa and her team were able to detect the chemical composition of these bowls without damaging them. By comparing the chemical signatures of the bowls with those of the materials still at old Chinese kiln sites, Nizialek and her team can pinpoint which Chinese kilns likely produce the ceramic bowls, so they can detect the origin of those bowls thanks to X-ray fluorescence. Because of a new technology, researchers can locate and recover more shipwrecks? No. Researchers have been able to identify the location of a number of Chinese kilns in operation 1,000 years ago. It's not about detecting location, it's about the fact that people can know the origin of the bowls. With the help of special tool, researchers have determined the likely origin of bowls recovered from a shipwreck. The answer is C. It tells about the origin. Before the invention of portable X-rays, the text doesn't even talk about before the invention of X-ray. The answer is C. I wish I could remember that first day, first hour, first moment of your meeting me. If bright or dim the season, it might be summer or winter for all I can say. So unrecorded did it slip away, so blind I was to see and to foresee, so dull to mark the budding of my tree that wouldn't blossom yet for many a May. The main idea here, the speaker celebrates our passage of time and strengthens relationship. On the contrary, the speaker tells that she would like to remember what happened and she didn't pay enough attention to the relationship and she regrets about it, just like here. So unrecorded did it slip away, so blind I was to see to foresee. And also, I wish I could remember that first day. So she doesn't remember the first day and she regrets about it. The speaker, okay, then option B. Because the speaker didn't anticipate how important a relationship would become, she cannot recall how the relationship began, which she regrets. The answer is B. As the anniversary of the beginning of an important relationship approaches, it doesn't talk about the anniversary at all, so the answer isn't C. After years of neglecting a once valuable relationship, the speaker worries it may be too late for her to salvage. She isn't talking about saving the relationship, so the answer is B. Based on the text, in what way is the human mind like a flower? As a fragile and lovely flower unfolds in its gleaming foliage on the breast of the fostering earth, if the dew and the rain draw it forth, so does my tender mind flourish, if it be fed with the sweet dew of the fostering spirit. So it tells that the flower thrives if the dew and the rain draw it forth. The same way the mind flourishes because of the sweet dew of the fostering spirit. It becomes increasingly vigorous with the passage of time. No. It draws strength from changing weather. No. Flower draws strength from rain. Mind draws strength from fostering spirits. It requires proper nourishment in order to thrive. The answer is C. It perseveres despite challenging circumstances. It doesn't talk about challenging circumstances. So the answer is C. Archaeologists have discovered a runestone in Norway that may contain the earliest example of written words in Scandinavia. Carbon dating at the discovery site reveals that the stone was likely carved between 1 and 250 CE. Rhinologist Crystal Zimmer believes the stone will be helpful in learning more about the use of runic alphabets in early Iron Age Scandinavia. Battles. The main idea here isn't battles of the Iron Age. A runestone found Norway. It's the main idea. The text tells us about the finding and how it will be helpful. So the answer is B. A new method for dating rock samples. It doesn't talk about new method. The research interest of Christopher Selmer. Christopher Selmer isn't the main idea here. It just tells what he believes and how will it help the runestone will help. So the answer is B. To understand how Paleolithic artists navigated dark caves, archaeologist Angelos Medina Alcaide and her team tested different lighting methods in a cave in Spain using replicas of artifacts found in European caves without. They used 3 different Paleolithic light sources: torches, animal fat, lamps, and fireplaces, determining that each likely had a specific purpose. For instance, the team learned that the animal fat lamps were less useful than torches. So here the main idea is the fact that the team determined that each kind of lighting has its purpose. Medina Alcaide and her team study demonstrated that fireplaces were essential. No, it doesn't talk about how essential fireplaces were. Medina Alcaide and her team discovered that Paleolithic cave artists in Spain used animal fat lamps more often. No, it doesn't talk which kind of lighting people used more often. Were reluctant to draw many conclusions from their study because of the difficulties they had replicating. It doesn't talk about the fact that it was difficult to replicate those lighting sources. So the answer should be D. And tested Paleolithic light sources and learned some details about how Paleolithic artists traveled within dark caves. The answer is indeed D. It tells about the testing and the results. So the answer is D. Now, microplastics are tiny pieces of plastic waste. Areas of the ocean with higher concentrations of microplastics particles also have smaller and fewer waves. A study by Yu Kun Sun and colleagues found that the concentration of microplastic particles cannot be the only reason for this reduced wave activity, because the concentration of particles that would have the observed effect is much higher than that found in these areas in the ocean. However, they found that surfactants, chemicals often used to manufacture plastics, are released in the water from microplastics and have a much stronger wave-reducing effect. According to the text, what did Sun and colleagues discover about the surfactants? They have much stronger effect on wave activity than microplastics alone do. The answer is probably A. Let's look at the other options. They are mainly composed of water. It doesn't really mention that. The main idea here is the fact that surfactants make the waves less strong and they are more effective than microplastics. They are helpful for removing microplastics. No, it doesn't talk about removing microplastics. They can be used to contain microplastics within certain areas of the ocean. No, it is already effective than microplastics. So the answer is A. What does the text indicate about the discovery of sandal? The ice melted on Norwegian mountain during a particularly warm summer in 2019, revealing a 1700-year-old sandal to a mountaineer looking for artifacts. The sandal would normally never have degraded quickly, but it was instead well preserved for centuries by surrounding ice. According to archaeologist Espen Finstad and his team, the sandal, like those worn by Imperial Romans, wouldn't have offered any protection from the cold in the mountains, so some kind of insulation like fabric or animal skin would have needed to be worn. So we need to what the text indicates about the discovery of the sandal. Temperatures contributed to both protected and revealing the sandal. The answer is probably A, because it was protected thanks to ice, which is dependent on weather, and also it was revealed because of really warm summer in 2019. So the answer is A, but let's look at other options. The discovery revealed that the Roman Empire had more influence on Norway. It doesn't really affect the sandal, and the text also doesn't tell that at all. Archaeologists would have found the sandal eventually without help from the general public. There wasn't help from the general public. The sandal would have degraded if it hadn't been removed from the ice. By the time they found the sandal, it was already removed from the ice. So the answer is A. Buck the sled dog living within John Thornton in Yukon, Canada. Thornton alone held back. The rest of mankind was as nothing. Chance travelers might praise or pet him, but he was cold under it all, and from a too demonstrative man he would get up and walk away. When Thornton's partners, Hans and Pete, arrived on the long-expected draft, Buck refused to notice them till he learned they were close to Thornton. After that, he tolerated them in a passive sort of way, accepting favors from them as though he favored them by accepting. So for Buck, his Thornton is quite important. We need to find this choice. Buck has become less social. He's not less social, he just pays more attention to Thornton. So the answer here is D. Buck holds Thornton in higher regard than any other person. He only pays attention to him and not any attention to other people. But let's eliminate B and C too. Buck mistrusts humans and does his best to avoid them. He's not trying to avoid them, he just don't like them. Also, he doesn't mistrust them. Buck has been especially well liked by most of the Thornton's friends. No, the main idea even isn't this, and also the text doesn't say that. So the answer is D. Now, question 39. To protect themselves and being attacked, hagfish, jewels, marine animals that resemble eels will release large quantities of slimy mucus-like threads. Because these threads are unusually strong and elastic, scientists at Suganidisha often used in fabrics. The researchers want to reproduce these threads in the lab because farming hagfish, for their slime would be expensive and potentially harmful to the hagfish. So hagfish helps the researchers to find a way of creating petroleum-based another kind of fabric. Let's see which answer choice tells that. The slimy threads that hagfish release might help researchers create a new kind of fabric. They won't help, they just inspire to. Probably the answer is probably B. Hagfish have inspired researchers to develop a new petroleum-based fabric. It inspired them. So the answer isn't A, and the hagfish aren't well suited to being raised in captivity. The main idea isn't this. The ability of hagfish to slam their attackers compensates for their being jealous. It doesn't say about compensation, so the answer is B. Culinary anthropologist Smart Grasvenor may be known for her decades of work in national public television and radio, but her book Vibration Cooking or The Travel Notes of Gitchy Girl is likely her most influential project. The 1970 book, whose title refers to Smart Grasvenor's roots in the low country of South Carolina, was unusual for its time. It combined memoir, recipes, travel writing, and social commentary, and challenged notions about conventions of food and cooking. Long admired by many, the book and its author have shaped contemporary approaches to writing about cuisine. Each choice describes the main idea of the text. Smart Grasvenor's unconventional book Vibration Cooking or The Travel Notes of a Gitchy Girl is an important contribution to food writing. Smart Grasvenor held many different positions over her life. It's too general. The answer is probably not B. Smart Grasvenor's groundbreaking book didn't receive the praise it deserved. It doesn't tell that, it talks about her contributions. Smart Grasvenor was a talented chef whose work inspired many people. The main idea here is A, because of her, it mentions her contributions to food writing, and here the most important part is the fact that she made an unusual book where she wrote about recipes, memoir, travel writing, and etc. So the answer is A, her contributions is the main idea here. According to text, what was surprising to scientists studying the seismic activity data from NASA's InSight lander? Recently, scientists looked at data collected by NASA's InSight lander to learn more about seismic activity on Mars, known as Marsquake. The data shows that Marsquake all started from the same location on the planet. This discovery is surprising to scientists as they expected that the Marsquake would originate from all over the planet because of the cooling of the planet's surface. So, the thing that was surprising for scientists was the fact that The Marsquake started from the same location instead of starting everywhere. Let's see. The surface temperature of Mars has been rising. It hasn't been rising. There were different types of seismic waves. No. NASA's InSight lander collected less data. No. All the Marsquakes started from the same location on the planet. The answer is D. Just like written here. Same location. The answer is D. Businesses selling clothing and other fashion items face obstacles in trying to forecast how much product to order. Taste and styles change quickly, while manufacturing clothing takes a significant amount of time. Researchers Yoram Fu and Marshall Fisher have found that combined sellers' own data with information gathered from social media can dramatically improve the accuracy of such forecasts by 24 to 57% in the cases they directly studied. Better predictions mean demand is easier to meet without retailers becoming overstocked. Okay, let's look at the choices. Using multiple data sources can enhance the ability of sellers in the fashion industry to anticipate demand. Social media is revolutionizing how both sellers and researchers view the fashion industry. The main idea here isn't this. Becoming overstocked is the main preoccupation of sellers. It doesn't really say that it's the main preoccupation. Retailers can use their own data to accurately predict how tastes and styles are evolving. They can't really do that. That's why they use social media. The answer that's why is A. Using multiple data sources can enhance the ability of sellers in the fashion industry to anticipate demand, just like written here. And thanks to that, they can have better predictions and not become overstocked. In her 1998 book, Blues, Legacies, and Black Feminism, Angela Y. Davis bases her analysis in part on recordings of songs sung in the 1920s by Gertrude Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith. Davis focuses on how Rainey and Smith improvised the lyrics, replacing the original lines with mischievous jokes and wordplay. Davis's work was particularly labor-intensive because, in order to transcribe or write down the lyrics as Rainey Smith had sang them, Davis had to listen repeatedly to the vinyl recording, which weren't very clear. What the text most strongly suggests about the songs sung by Rainey and Smith. The songs have grown in popularity since Rainey and Smith were sang them. It doesn't really say that. There were more recordings made of Rainey. It doesn't say that there were more recordings. There were very few, if any, reliable transcriptions of Smith and Rainey improvised lyrics when Davis began her research. It's true, because she had repeatedly listened to the vinyl recording. According to Davis, the songs sung by Rainey were more musically innovative. No, she doesn't mention that at all. Mrs. Ochiltree was a woman of a strong individuality whose comments upon her acquaintances, present or absent, were more marked by a frankness at the time, no less than startling. This characteristic caused her to be more or less avoided. Mrs. Ochiltree was aware of this sentiment on the part of acquaintances and rather exulted in it. So her acquaintances didn't really like her because she was quite frank. They tried to refrain from discussing topics that would upset. No. They are unable to spend as much time with Mrs. Ochiltree as she would like. No. They are too preoccupied. No one is too preoccupied. They are likely be offended by Mrs. Ochiltree has said about them. Yes, she is frank. She can tell something wrong and they can get offended. That's the main idea here. Cats can judge unseen people's position in space by the sound of their voices and thus react with surprise when the same person calls to them from two different locations in a short span of a time. Saho Takaki and colleagues reached this conclusion by measuring cats' level of surprise based on their ear and head movements. So the question is, how did researchers determine the level of surprise displayed in the cats? Based on their ear and head movements. They did that. They watched how each cat moved its ear and head. It's the answer. They examined how each cat reacted to the voice. No. They studied how each cat physically interacted with its owner. No. They tracked how each cat moved around the room. No. So that's all. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.